From the main menu, you come to the Schedule screen. The Schedule screen is where you're going to be doing the labor, materials, and payment information. And in addition to that, you're going to track mileage that you go to the locations. This is tax deductible at the end of the year in most places. And the expenses are overhead expenses that for this particular job of items that are not charged to the client but are costs that are included in your overhead cost as far as doing this project. Now, to do a project, you basically have to have the client added to the customer screen. When you come into this screen, you will click New Record to add a new individual invoice. It will automatically assign the next work order number. You would type in the project description. You would go ahead and put in the start date and time for the project when it's going to start. And this helps you to schedule your time and your employees or yourself. And then the estimated completion date, so you can see the back end responsibility as far as when this project should end. From the client, you use the drop-down list and pick the client. In this case, there's only 2 sample records in there. There may be obviously as many clients as you have. You pick the correct client. That will fill in the bottom fields automatically for you. On this screen, you have the typical things for doing a find, perform the find, show all, the server menu, and the main menu. If you're on the server through a browser, you're going to have to submit any changes that you do as far as the record information in this screen. Then also on the, if you wanted to and you wanted to reverse the changes you made on the server, just hit cancel. You cannot do that on the iPad because the iPad, as you change field information, it automatically updates. These are the primary screens that you're going to be using in this application to include the invoice labor and material invoice. And then it's supporting different screens that are something where you come back to the schedule from these screens, you can bounce right back out and go back to a different screen. Now on this screen, you have the summary totals for the labor and materials plus the taxes for each individual one if you're charging taxes, and the summary total that is in here for the materials and labor to include the taxes. As you do a payment against an invoice that you're going to give to the client and you're receiving a payment, or you're going to put in a balance due, in this particular case you could have a balance due, you could add in the entire amount or one partial part of it. In this case, this looks like this was a deposit that was paid of $176.18, and from the 555 cents it left a balance of $324.37 yet to be paid. So you have to cover that expense as you do the process of adding a different record on a different payment for a different date. And then the amount that's due, if you're going to take the whole thing, $324.37, you would put that in there and then show that payment and how it was paid by using the drop down. Or if it's a balance due, you can put a balance due in there without a date on when it's actually due, so that you have a flag in the report for payments showing that a balance due is there and needs to be paid. And then on the both credit card and checks over in the next field, you would put the last 4 of a credit card or the check number of the check that was received. Now the credit card information doesn't sound important, but it actually is. If you have a card and the client came back to you and said that he paid a bill, you would want to know what card he paid it on. You can ask him which is the last 4 of the card that you paid it on. He may be confused because he didn't say it on a statement that he paid it or didn't pay it. It'll automatically take whatever you put in the payment due and the amount, and then it'll show a balance due as far as that particular payment is concerned. Now, obviously, there's still a balance due of $324.37, so you have to put in enough in there in order to show the payment. And this is a scrolling portal, so you can add as many payments as are required, actually an infinite number if you had to. In addition to that, there is a report from the main menu that goes to the payment report that you can run to see all outstanding payments, either for a client using a find or all clients that have a balance due that is remaining. On the labor tab, you would go ahead and type in the actual thing that you're going to be doing. and this can vary by a million different things. So you put the task in that is going to be done, you add the date in the drop-down calendar, and then for the number of employees, it would be the number of employees times the number of hours that were actually worked by those employees. In this case, 3 times 6 would be 18. So $18 would be the labor hours. The labor rate is defined by the type of labor first, and you can edit this. There is going to be a list view that you can go ahead and edit and add more types of labor in here. And in the same way, the screen that would be for that would be up here for the labor rate list. And in the labor rate list, what you're doing is you're putting in your labor rate standard price for whatever the task is. Now you can alter this because this is only an indicator of what the labor rate should be. If you're actually in the invoice and you want to change it, you have that option. If you want to add a new thing in here, for example, that you don't have, like, for example, doing siding, you could create a siding, install siding, and put a labor rate for that in there by adding a new record first, adding the labor rate, and then the siding install, and then it would add it down here. If you want to modify any of these, do not modify them if you're actually using them as far as something. Do not delete something that says landscape unless you're going to add a different one, like it says landscape grading. That would be different. So you could add a different one for landscape grading. And as with the things before, if you're doing this on the server, go ahead and use the submit to save the changes, or cancel to cancel your changes that you made. To get back to the schedule, click the schedule icon. And as you come back in here, you'll see now that you've got this information, it'll calculate the subtotal. And on the taxes, you have another list that you can do to set taxes. Now, in this case, you can actually have a county, city, state, and local tax, depending on which one it is. In some cases, it's best to combine them all together. So for example, if you're only paying state tax, and then you find out that there's a city tax because you're working in the city tax, you would add the addition of the 875 plus whatever the city tax is for the total of both of them together, and then that's what you'd be using for charging tax. This works just like the last one does by adding and editing information in here. Now, if you have questions on doing the tax, give me a call and I can explain the many different ways as far as tax can be done, but it's your responsibility to pay your taxes, or in some cases you may not want to assign a tax at all. You can take and click twice in here and then remove the tax. Now that can't be done on the iPad. You're going to have to go in and possibly delete the record because the iPad does not allow you to change a blank or double click in a record because of the scrollers that are used in here. What you can do is create a blank one in the tax rate by saying blank, and then use that to go ahead and wipe out whatever's in here. In the tax amount, this is the calculation for this base amount times the tax to give you the tax that's actually going to be applied. The labor is the sum is the tax plus the labor subtotal for the tax. Now this is kind of important for reporting. If you're doing a multi-step task and maybe you didn't finish it on the first day, do not put done in until that line item is actually completed and charged. You could actually split it out if you wanted to and call it additional work for doing footings, and add another line and do additional for a different day if you want to. Because what this is a running total system for keeping track of all your labor and whether it's done or not. There is actually a labor report we'll go into later that is here. The same thing pertains on materials. Materials for the job, you would go ahead and use the materials from the inventory system that have a indicator of what the cost is supposed to be charged, but you have the option to change that price, in this case by $1. Say you underbid your job a little bit, well, you can pad that by putting the price each a little higher than the standard rate that you're using. Now within the inventory system, when you add the standard rate in there, that can be changed if you needed to without affecting any of the records that are out here. It will not change these. So this can be modified as required. Say, for example, if there's a sale and you bought something at a sale and you want to sell those out at a different rate, or maybe there's a permanent price change on an item and it's either gone up or down, you want to change it in inventory to indicate that. Now, as far as the rate, you can type that in there as far as the price and the number quantity of the actual ones that are used that are calculated over here into the subtotal. This part in here is very important and needs to be added. It's used on. This is just the cement. Where was it used? In this case, it was used in the fence footings that was in the job on labor over on the labor tab. And when was it installed? It was installed on this date. This is also helpful information when you're looking up these items in the materials report. The next thing is the same as we already covered on the taxes. Once again, if you're charging taxes for city, state, or both together, you would put the appropriate tax rate either by city or by both the city and state. If you're not charging tax at all because the item by the state is not taxable, then you do not indicate a tax in there. Now it will take the tax rate times this and come up with the actual sales tax that are due. If you have a total over here, that is the total of the subtotal and the tax amount for the total. And that would also be indicated at the top as you change it. For example, the blue fields up here are the material cost. And in this case, that's the only item at this point. But if you add additional ones, then this number will go up. And also the combined materials and labor would go up. And that would affect your actual tax amount or the actual amount that's being paid. The next thing is your mileage. On your mileage, this is where you go to a job site and you're using the location you're going from to the actual job site, either from your office site or from another site where you're moving from that site to the actual job site. If you can see down here, it shows the payment due for up here, and that's an indicator when you're in the tabs, it's hidden, and then it's put down here at the bottom, so you can see it's still at the bottom. On the mileage, this is something that is taken off on taxes if that's appropriate for your state and federal taxes. So you would enter this if you're going to deduct that from your year or quarterly amount that you're going to be declaring on your taxes as part of your write-off for your business. And this is something your CPA is going to need in order to keep your taxes down. So this is very valuable information. It could be 75 cents a mile or go up or down depending on the federal standard charge for mileage for taxes. That is summarized when you put it in here. And the way you put it in is you put the project name from above. That is the one you're working on. The type of trip that you're doing. In this case, it'd be a sales trip or whatever it might be. And you can change that again in this screen over here like we showed you before. There's another list screen changeable. And when you go back to the mileage, you would add the start date and the end date for the trip, and then the odometer reading starting and the odometer reading ending, and then it'll calculate the value of that. And this is by this project, so it's going to summarize all the mileage for this particular project. Now, if you bid at a certain rate for your client in a certain number of trips, and then they add trips for their own reasons, you need to put in a change order. This gives you the amount of the change order that you should be adding as far as the travel for the mileage. Because what happens is you're going to be charging more on the interim for the trips that you're actually going on to the client. And if you say maybe you're going to do 6 trips and it turns out that it was 10 because the client didn't get his act together, then you're going to want to up your rate a little bit with a change order for the additional mileage that you had to pay out. Because it's not only the physical miles that you're going to get back from the government, there's actually wear and tear on your vehicle that's included in this. And that's not tax deductible, but it's a charge that you actually have to do for additional trips, which takes actual labor time, if you look at it like that. Then the last tab that we're looking at is the expenses that are going to be charged that are overhead expenses, and this is by this job. And the expenses are anything that is paid out of your pocket that is not going to be paid by the client. Those are overhead expenses. And in this case, you don't click in the orange field. You click here and add the date of the expense, put in the type of the expense. Let's say this one was a shop vac bags for your shop vac, which is not going to be charged to the client. It's an overhead expense. And then where did you buy them and paid this to? In this case, it may be Home Depot or some other department store. Then you put the actual amount that you paid. And then if it's tax deductible, make sure that you put a check in the check box for yes, tax deductible. All expenses paid will be summed up here, and then they would be run on the expense report, which we'll show separately. Okay, going back to the labor and these individual items, like in the mileage, you do not add anything in here. You start by adding the project name. If you have any questions on this screen, make sure that you get in touch with me either by email or go to the tech support site, and then you can chat online with me. If it's too expensive for a telephone call, or you don't have the time to do an email and you need an answer right now. Once again, I just want to cover that this amount here is the sum balance of this amount up above. And as you enter the payments, this should go to finally to 0 when all payments are made. Okay, that's the last thing I want to cover. And then the portals, these are multi-line portals. If you want to look at any line item record, like to delete one in case you need to delete an error record, you click on this button, go to the individual portal record, and delete it with a delete button in that portal. That's the same thing true over on this side. If you have any more questions, just give me a contact, please.